All right, welcome everyone to the second DEM I Wonder webinar. DEM has so many services, offerings, programs, and hidden gems that we want to share with all of you. So we're excited to take just a few minutes each week to highlight these features in our weekly webinar. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many exercises have been postponed or canceled. The Utah Division of Emergency Management is hosting this weekly webinar series aimed at providing local emergency managers with relevant content and opportunities to enhance their capabilities. Webinars will be live for Q&A and will be recorded for later viewing on the DEM website and YouTube channel. Most of these webinars will be workshops with a hands-on portion, which will allow emergency managers to test a DEM product or process. Our schedule today will be as follows. We'll start with our ground rules and etiquette. Next, we'll have a brief presentation by Jamie Huff, the Utah Risk Map Program Manager, on I wonder how flood risk maps are created and updated for my jurisdiction. Following the presentation, there will be a hands-on portion where participants will be encouraged to test out the product or process that was presented. Following the hands-on portion of our program, the presenter will be available for a Q&A session. Following the Q&A, we'll close with a short message about upcoming webinars. The ground rules today are fairly simple. Please mute your line while the presenter is presenting. If you have a question, you may type it in the group chat or unmute at the appropriate time to ask your question. This session is being recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. Thank you all for your attendance today. And with that, we'll turn the time over to Jamie Huff.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jamie Huff. I'm the Utah Risk Map Program Manager, just like Tracy said, and I am within the Division of Emergency Management. If you're familiar with the sections, I see some familiar faces on, so they probably know a little bit about me, but there's a couple, or at least one for now, unfamiliar face that you can learn a little bit more about the Risk Map program. And I'm going to share my screen here. And hopefully coming up. And then, oops, started on the wrong one. Of course it did. Here we go. Now let's do this. All right. So I hope everyone can see that title screen right here. Do you see the now? Do you see the slides? All right, full screen slides.
Jamie, it is only showing a portion of your screen.
Oh no, this happened to me last time, actually. Let's see. How is that any better?
It's still cutting off the right-hand side.
Okay, let's do this. I will try. I'm sorry. Turn off my second screen here. I think that's what happened last time. There. Is that any better?
No, it's still cutting off that right-hand side. I'm not sure.
That's so strange. Now I'm just on my. I apologize. I haven't had. I had this issue long ago, but then didn't. Thought that was fixed. No? Is that any better?
No, now it's cutting off half the screen.
Okay. I'm sorry. Let's try this one more time. I'm going to do my screen instead, maybe. Is that any better?
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that, everybody. I just can't see you guys now, so I can't see your reactions or anything like that. So if you did not know, my program is located in the Division of Emergency Management. We actually just reorganized our section a little bit, or our division a little bit, and we now have a new natural hazards section because there is a group of us that deal with a lot of, obviously, the natural hazards that we have in our state, as well as a lot of data. We produce and disseminate a lot of data, and that is part of the Utah Risk Map program. It is a part of FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program, so I do produce floodplain mapping and flood risk products based on FEMA criteria, and do get a lot of funding through FEMA, as well as a lot of our other grant programs within DEM. But obviously I am located here in Utah. I'm a state employee and advocate for our communities here. So we call it the Utah Flood Risk Program. So wanted to point out quickly, you live here in Utah too, but we do have several types of flooding that are very common within our state. And I would say flash floods here are now probably one of the more prevalent flooding sources and flooding occurrences here in Utah. Maybe back in the day, it would have been more your snowmelt and just kind of high water events, but really we're seeing more and more our weather patterns changing, and we're seeing these more monsoonal flash flood events within our state, and they're very localized. So you don't get this widespread flooding, although it can happen. Obviously, any type of flood event can happen, but more commonly we're getting these flashy events that are localized in either maybe one drainage, maybe two drainages, and in very small areas. So maybe one person on one side of the street might have gotten flooded while the other person didn't. So want to pay attention to that. So we do, and we also have a lot of events that have overburdened stormwater systems. And again, that can be derived from those flash flood events, really high intensity, short duration storm events that are happening. Our stormwater systems just can't handle a lot of it. So this is an example of what happened in Salt Lake City in 2017. We do still get the snowmelt flooding. We do at Box Elder and Cache County. I think this is Box Elder, if I'm not mistaken, that these events still can happen, and that's still a flood risk that we have. And then just, your general stream runoff in overbank, river overbank flooding, our stream runoff maybe can't handle the runoff that's occurring in our streams and rivers here. We also have mud and debris flows. And again, this can either be attributed to a flash flood event, or we'll talk a little bit more about flood risk after wildfires. And this happens to be in San Quentin after a wildfire, but that can happen and does happen here in our state. More often than not, I think we're getting more of those. You also can get flooding from canal and levee breaches. Although these are kind of man-made channels, they can and do fail. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, and we hope we design them not to, but they still can happen. And want to make sure that either residents and are aware of the risk, as well as that we're planning around this type of flooding event that can happen. We also have ice dam flooding. Again, although rare, we still can get this. Our streams and creeks thaw. Once they're frozen over the winter, and we still can get some ice jam flooding. Maybe some ice forms behind bridges and culverts and blocks the flow of water downstream and can flood upstream. So we do get that. And what this alluvial fan flooding is coming more and more to light. I think it's probably one of our most underrated flooding events, I think, or underknown really, and socialized events that we have here. We have a lot of communities that are built up on benches that come out from these streams and canyons, and water. If you think about an alluvial fan, if you look at that graphic, once it comes out of the canyon, if it's on an alluvial fan, there's really no defined channel to move the water downstream. So you have this what we call alluvial fan flooding, which if you take like a table and flip it on its side and pour like a cup of water or something down it, it basically will go, the water will go where it wants to go. And this is very similar approach to alluvial fan flooding, because there is no defined channel. It's all sediment that's come out of that canyon. And we have a lot of these in our state, and a lot of communities don't have that information provided to them. And a lot of communities have developed on benches. So my program is actually going to identify some of these, and you can see on the lower left, and actually the lower two pictures, there has been some analysis done, but we're trying to get one for statewide, so we know exactly where these dangerous areas are, because they can produce flash flood and debris flows downstream. We also have erosion concerns. Obviously, this is probably more prevalent down in the southern Utah areas. This happens to be Washington County, where just one event can erode away a bank and completely change the characteristics of a river downstream. So we need to pay attention to that as well. So just out of curiosity, kind of think in your head, I can't see you guys, unfortunately, but how much of the state do you think has been identified with a flood risk? It's on a map, it's been mapped, and how much, of the state do you think? Think of a number in your head. I'll give you a second. I'll even give you a map to kind of look at it for a minute. All those blue areas, or the blue lines, are these streams that have been mapped. And so think of a number in your head, and all of those green or kind of olive colored are streams that have not been mapped, but do have the potential to carry either floodwaters or high water, or even rainwater in high rain events. They do have that potential to carry that. So with that, I hope you have that percentage in your head. It's actually less than 10%. And that is a very low number for our state, and my program is working to increase that. But wanted to let you know that only 10% of our flood risk is mapped, and that includes communities. And to give you an example, Utah County, this is Utah County, just the blue lines have mapped flood risk, and all of the purplish, maroony colors are not mapped. So there's a lot of areas that don't have mapped flood risk, and those are areas that can flood without either the community or residents knowing that there is a risk there. And I will say that not all of Utah needs to be mapped, because obviously there's places in our state that don't have population, but my main focus is trying to get the populated areas with flood risk and developing areas with identified flood risk. And this is a map of just those dots, the colored dots, the green and the red. The green are communities that are participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, and the red ones are non-participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, and yellow even. I don't know if you can see those very well. I can't on the screen, but we do have a lot of several communities that don't participate in this program. And for your awareness, that program offers flood insurance for residents for communities that participate, so they can protect themselves from flooding. So why is it important to map flood risk? It is our most common hazard. We see flooding more often in our state than any other hazard, and that's probably identified also in your hazard mitigation plans. So pay attention to those. We deal with flooding more often than any other hazard. And 70% of flooding in Utah does occur outside of that mapped special flood hazard area. And that can be a couple of factors. One, the stream just isn't mapped for flood risk. And two, we do still have a lot of outdated maps, and my program's working on that as we speak. But we do have a lot of information that needs to be updated. So wanted to let you know that 70% of that flooding, which is a good majority, occurs outside of those mapped areas. So keep that in mind. But really a big factor is residents are looking to community officials to provide information. And right now I'm talking about flood risk, but you can, think about that with any risk, any hazard, wildfire, earthquake, what have you. I'm going to be focusing on flood today, but the most common, actually, the thing I hear more and more is residents in communities don't really go looking for hazard information on property that they're purchasing or developing. And hazards are kind of an afterthought, which is unfortunate. And one of the things that I hear from residents all the time is, well, my city let me build there, so I thought it was safe. Or my city let me build here, so it's okay. And that may not be the case in a lot of cases. So we really want you as a community official to understand where those flood risks are, so residents can be informed about their risk. And then secondly, obviously, emergencies and planning for emergencies. You want to know where this flood risk is, so we can evacuate or plan. If we see flood waters coming, we know what to do. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So why the maps are made, again, it informs communities about that flood risk. That's a really important piece to it. It also sets minimum floodplain development standards in a community. So when we create a map, we give it to you as communities to implement. And usually there is a flood code or a flood hazard ordinance that you have if you participate in the NFIP. And that code is directly tied to these maps and how you build in these specific hazard areas. It also, not only that, it also determines the cost for flood insurance for residents in those high hazard areas. So, if a community or if a resident is building high or building to that base flood elevation that's on the maps, and we'll talk about that, what is their flood insurance rate for that particular property? And then again, it really helps property owners financially protect themselves against flood loss. So if you did not know, homeowners insurance does not cover flooding, and flood insurance is really the only financial recourse after a flood event. And it doesn't matter, we don't care if it's a federal policy, a federal NFIP policy, or a private policy. We just want people to be able to recover after an event, and flood insurance is really the only financial way to protect themselves at the residential level. Because you as a community, you don't have funding, to pay for someone, for flood losses. The state doesn't, and very rarely does FEMA come in and help. And we've only had one individual assistance declaration, and that was after the Magna earthquake. So there's really flood insurance is the only recourse, or is the best recourse. Why are they updated? I've heard recently, like, my flood risk has already been mapped. It's going to be like that forever. That map is going to stay like that forever. Nope, that's not necessarily the case. We have to routinely update them because we have, obviously we've talked about our changing weather patterns. Our weather patterns are shifting. It's becoming more flash flood, more very intense rainstorms that are coming in. We take that into consideration when we map. And then development in a community can also change the floodplain as well. So if you're developing within a special flood hazard or near a creek, maybe that's not mapped, whatever you do upstream and downstream, or whatever development occurs upstream and downstream, can affect that flood risk. Is a new bridge going in that might be undersized? Is a new culvert going in? Are you putting, subdivisions in areas where it used to see water and now it's being constricted, somewhere, and the risk is changing. So we do periodically need to update these maps to make sure that what you see on the ground is shown appropriately. And then obviously, we have flood events that can change the maps as well. Like we showed this picture for Washington County. That particular event, I think I've heard the statistic that stream bank eroded 10 feet or more. Actually, I think it was more than that. I wish I had that number on hand, but it was that stream bank eroded quite a bit, and it was quite shocking to these residents because they thought they had built back from the original stream bank before this event. So this was in 2005. So our floodplains are changing constantly. So now I wanted to go quickly into how flood risk is assessed, and I'm going to attempt to play a video that shows you what it's a video that's originated from the Northwest, but we have the same principles and practices that we use here, but it is focused on the Northwest. But it really provides a great basic understanding of how flood risk is actually developed and mapped. So I'm going to try to do this. Let's see. Come on. Tab, experts, share. So we see this.
Yes.
I'm hoping you guys hear and see this.
My name is Larry Schick. I've been a weatherman in the Pacific Northwest for the past 30 years. The Pacific Northwest is full of wonders, beautiful.
Actually, I am going to stop sharing my camera because sometimes that does help.
Beautiful scenery,
Okay.
diversity of terrains, and bodies
There we
of
go.
water. But we need to keep in mind that within all the beauty, there lies some hazards and risks. So I set out to learn more about how to better protect our community from the risk of floods. On a floodplain map, you can see what the relationship is between your property and the high-risk floodplain.
We use topographic information of the landscape to understand the shape of the earth, and that's collected generally with ground survey and also LiDAR survey from airplanes. And we put those together inside of the computer, and then we can run simulated flooding events to understand what would happen when there's a 1% annual chance flood. That really means that there's a 1% chance that that flood can happen in any given year. So it's entirely possible for there to be two in the same year or in back-to-back years. If there are really significant changes in the patterns of rainfall or in the river systems, that might be a situation where we look at updating the floodplain maps. There are insurance requirements for people who live within floodplains, but then there are other risk reduction strategies that these floodplain maps help you understand.
Now, they're not a perfect representation of a flood, right?
No, they're not. They're tools. They help us understand patterns on the landscape and relative risk in different locations.
It's very important to be connected with the community, your neighbors, and also county and state officials to understand your flood risk. A floodplain is any area of land that can be affected during a flood or high water. Washington State is called the Evergreen State because it is green, at least through western Washington. During a huge storm, this would be filled with water, conveying water out of the Cascades into the lowlands of the Pacific Northwest. Surveying such an area of the Northwest is very challenging.
Hydrology is the development of how much water is coming through the river, and hydraulic engineering is where is that water going to go and how deep is it going to be. Total stations are used to survey underwater. In that case, you have one person on the bank who is operating the total station equipment, and a second person who was wading through the river with a rod, characterizing the different points underneath.
What we're targeting is to identify changes in slopes so that we can make linear sections and connect the dots to get the overall shape. We take the water level results and we plot those out onto maps. What we're really looking to do with these maps is provide a communication tool so that people can make informed decisions about where they live and what they build.
It's our job as the hydraulic engineers to delineate those risk zones within the floodplain.
When surveyors make a transect, they need to be in or near or on the water. But some areas it's really almost impossible. One way to do this is to use LiDAR.
LiDAR is a laser-based application that allows us to create topographical maps. We're a two-man crew with myself as the pilot and a sensor operator running the lasers in the back.
By sending a pulse of light From the plane to the ground, it will bounce off of objects, and they measure the distance by the timing.
The accuracy of LiDAR is incredible. It can literally sense something as small as this rock. We're on the east side of the Cascades now, and it's quite a dramatic difference. In an area like this where there's not much vegetation, if you have a fire, it totally strips any cohesion you have with the soil. As a result, when you have a thunderstorm in the summer or some snow melt, it may destabilize the slope, so you not only get landslides, but it also will concentrate the rain in the river valley much quicker. To complete the picture, we talked to a hydrologist.
Rivers are changing during every event, so that means the public needs to be really vigilant because their risk is always changing. Some of the best information we have are from homeowners that have lived through floods 40 years ago that have that written down. If it's documented, people can refer to that and share it with their neighbors or newcomers that might come in.
These maps help communities like yours assess flood risk, so you can take action and be resilient. Learn more at floodsmart.gov.
All right. Well, I hope that sheds a little bit more light on how we do that. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit more on what that means here in Utah. Actually, this thing will go away. There we go. So that video is on this at this link here, and I have a list of related links that you can use too. So if you want to look at it again, but FEMA's got a ton of those types of videos that just help explain a little bit more about how flood risk and how to help you as a community manage flood risk in your community. So. Again, they kind of explained it a little more, but to show you a couple more visuals, a floodplain is an area of land that can be affected during flood or high waters. That's, the entire floodplain. And then the flood map is made using 4 main points of data, which they explained a little bit on that video. The topography data or LiDAR, so the contours of the ground. The field survey, someone going out and physically being within that stream channel and surveying that area. The hydrology, or how much water is coming into the system, and then the hydraulics, which is where the water is moving into the system. And obviously, you at the community level have much more information, especially on structures like culverts and bridges and things like that. So we can use that information to further refine our analysis that we use. So that's all of the data pieces, and it is data driven because like they said, it is a statistical analysis, unless we have on the ground ground truthing through either past events or anything like that. Typically here, we're a very arid state, and a lot of folks may not have seen water in some areas, but the risk is still there. So again, just to give you a quick, quick idea that the topography, the study of the shape and the land features. And again, that's using our topography mapping and LiDAR, which LiDAR is, we develop it here with funding, and then it is given to USGS for review. So it ultimately ends up in a USGS database. And if you did not know, in Utah specifically, we had the last several years, we've done a massive effort to collect LiDAR, and all of the gray, the green, the purple, and I think that kind of yellowish light brown color is all of the LiDAR that's being acquired or has been acquired to date. And LiDAR, we have, in some areas, we have accuracy of 2 feet or less. So like that rock that he showed in that video, we, in some cases, have LiDAR as accurate as that. So If you're in one of these communities on this map, there is LiDAR either available right now or coming to you after this year. We've done a massive effort in collecting LiDAR, so and that will be available on the Utah Automated Geographic Reference Center site for use for anybody for any project. It's going to be free data, so it's going to be available at Utah AGRC. Then hydrology, we do study all of the water and the rain and the precipitation that comes into systems when we do a study. So it is the scientific study of movement and distribution of water. So when we come to you as a community and say, hey, we're going to do a flood study, we're going to try to collect this information, and then we put it into a report and provide it to you. So you as the community can review it and see if that's it. If what we're showing in a document and in our data analysis does happen on the ground. And then the same thing with hydraulic analyses. It's that study of fluids in motion. So when that water hits the ground and that precipitation hits the ground, where is it going? And it is, there are model software that we used to derive this information. It's a very long and tedious process, but it uses the topography data, the field survey information, and the hydrology, all the rain data to get maps like this to show where water is going and how deep it will be. So we have several different types of studies that we do produce. We have approximate studies or base level engineering, and that is more of your high level assessment of where water will go. It doesn't show how deep it will be or have elevations associated with it, but we can, give you a general idea of where the water will go once it hits the ground in your community. And I'll talk a little bit. Base level engineering is kind of a newer process. So you might still have zone A's on maps within your community, but we're trying to get those updated. Then we have something called a limited detailed study, which we take the approximate zones a step further, and we do an area where we do provide base flood elevations, but we don't provide a floodway because that's an extra step. And a floodway is basically the channel and areas adjacent to the channel that carry the deepest and fastest flowing waters within a floodplain. So not all communities have the risk is there, but not all communities have a mapped floodway. And then we take the detailed study as a step further and adds that floodway. So when we come to you and ask, what kind of study you want, these are the three main types of studies that we look at. Now, base level engineering is kind of a new approach to floodplain mapping. It uses two-dimensional modeling, and I'm probably going to get a little technical here, I apologize, but it uses that modeling software and takes it a step further and does actually provide elevations in the background. And, when you get a base level engineering study in your community, we talk about that in detail. Don't expect everyone to be experts, but want a little bit to understand, what we're doing and what we're providing. And this assessment allows us to gather much greater areas of information. So instead, back in the day, we used to, map maybe, 20 miles of a street, 20 miles of a community. Using this assessment and this type of approach, we can do many, many more on all of those little areas that weren't mapped. We can do that with this and at a lot cheaper. So for example, Tooele County right now is going through this process. And right now they have about 20 miles of mapped streams, and we are analyzing 1,800. So it's a much cheaper approach to analyzing risk and where water goes when it hits the ground. So our project phases, when we do identify an area, we will, there's, 4 phases, technically 5, but phase 0 is the collection of the LiDAR, which is that map that I showed you. So a lot of the state's going to have LiDAR. So in a lot of cases, we can, phase 0 will be done by the time we get to your community. Then we do that base level engineering and analysis, that high level analysis. to show, what's changed on your maps if you already have flood risk data identified, or, are there a lot of areas that haven't been mapped where now we can have some information. Then we go into what's called discovery and talk to you about where, now that you have that BLE data, what areas do you want studied in more detail? So do you want that floodway analysis, or would you rather just have that BLE data? So all of that, because I do very large areas, county-wide areas, takes many years. A project can take about 5 to 7 years. And because these projects are so big, in Tooele's case, 1,800 miles, we may not put on a map everything, but at least the data will be available. And then once we get to a draft phase, putting all that information onto a preliminary map, we share that with you and go out to the public and get some comments and feedback on that. And then we finalize the map. So again, all of that takes about 5 to 7 years, and these are all approximate because one study can go faster than another, and another can go slower than another. So it all depends on. But we really, really want your feedback because you know your community better than we do, and the more data we can get from you, the more information we can get from you as a community will only make these maps much more accurate. So typical community coordination meetings, we have a lot. And it's more now than previous years. So if you went through a mapping process, maybe mid-2000s, it's much different now. So we hold a ton of community meetings required in our case here. And then we also can have interim meetings held along the way. So if you have any questions about any of the data and you want something a little less formal, we can hold those meetings with you. So we're not making these maps in a bubble, and we do appreciate all of your feedback, big or small. So we will contact you to get you as a community official, as well as anyone else in the community that we would be willing to participate. So deliverables that we have, and I'm going to kind of quickly go over these because some of you may have seen them already, but we do try to do all hazards, but we do focus on about 90% of our studies are floodplain. We do create flood insurance rate maps like you see here, as well as the flood insurance study, which is the narrative of how the map was made. So it's basically the report document of how the map was made. And then now we produce all of that digitally and give that to you so you can use it in your GIS systems. We also produce what's called non-regulatory data, which is data that you don't need to use for permitting purposes, but you can use them for any other planning purposes or informational purposes. And I know a lot of emergency managers are on this call today, and so you can use this non-regulatory data. This is gold to you. So we'll give you the different data sets, and I know I'm pointing at the screen, but you can't see me, but the water surface elevations, you'll be able to see how deep the water is going to be in certain events, or where that the changes have been made since the last maps, or where you want to focus your efforts on emergency preparedness and planning in specific communities. Do you really want to put that assisted living center, adjacent to a high risk area? Will they be able to evacuate? Will they be able to plan for anything like that? So you can use this, a lot of this data, and this is gold to you. Or do you have existing structures that are in these zones, and how deep will it be? So we give you information included in that. So for a flood insurance rate map, anything with an A or B is the high risk area. And some of you may have maps that look like this, which are black and white. So the white areas are your low risk, or your what we call X zones, or C zones if you have an older map. That shaded X zone, that lighter gray area, what we call a shaded X zone, is your moderate risk area. And those are also called B zones on an older map. And then you have your darker gray areas that are your anything that has an A, AE, AO, AH, and I'll give you an example of what those mean in a minute. But those are your high risk areas, and then the cross hatching is your floodways. So a lot of you may see these. There's also zone Ds in our state. Those are unmapped and probably in the more rural areas, but that basically means that there is a risk of flooding there, but no one's really assessed it. So you don't really know how bad it is or how often it's going to happen. But there is a risk that could potentially be there. Some of you may have maps that look like this. They're basically the same map, just in a different visual format, color coded differently. So the blue areas are your high risk areas in this case. And if you had moderate risk areas or your B zones, it would be kind of that black stippling without any blue behind it. And then the newer maps look like this. They're a little more easier to read. So you now have the gold or a brown or orangey color, whatever you want to call that. Those are your areas of moderate risk. So for critical facilities, I would look at these areas for critical facilities. And then the blue and the red and blue crosshatch or stripes are your high risk areas or anything with an A, and the red stripes are your floodways. So those are what maps are now looking like. So if you have a map study going on, that's what it looks like. So here's where you can find your flood risk information, and we're going to do an exercise a little bit on one of these. So there's a FEMA map change viewer. So if you're going into a study and you have a preliminary map, you can see the difference between the current map and the draft map. You have the National Flood Hazard Layer, which is all the digital flood maps that are located within your state, and these are or within your community. Then you have the FEMA Map Service Center, which is the main repository of all maps. Doesn't matter if it's digital, paper, all of the data, any map changes, anything like that can be found at this location. But really, the very initial step, you do have copies, or you should have copies of your maps at your local community. And that typically, when I work with flood map updates, that's your city engineer, county engineer, your planning department, anything that does anywhere that does any permitting might have those might have that information. So if you're looking for them, those would be great places to start. But we do refer a lot of property owners to the local communities first. So here's what the FEMA Map Service Center looks like. You can either enter an address, or you can search all products, which there's a button in the middle here. There's a button that says search all products. Don't really know what map you're looking for. Then you can come here and then type in your state, your county, and then your community. And then it will tell you down here, what the effective products are, anything preliminary or draft, anything pending, meaning you've gone through a draft process and it's almost effective, or all of your older maps. You can even have your older maps here, and that these do include map changes. You can also, this is probably one of the most used resources, is the National Flood Hazard Layer, but be careful. I wanted to mention that this is just for digital maps only. Again, we're working on it. So I would say Utah County North, aside from a couple areas south of that, have digital maps. The rest are going to be paper and are going to be using the Map Service Center. But we're going to be using this as an example in a little bit. So all you do is type in an address, and once you go to the site, type in an address, and on the right-hand side, it kind of shows you what your risk is. And then same for the map change viewer. If it looks very similar, you type in an address, and it'll tell you if a map is being updated or not. And then if you have a specific property that you have a question on that has draft information, you can print out this report that shows the difference between the current effective map and the preliminary map. Kind of handy. So Wanted to quickly go over some funding, the funded or ongoing projects. If you haven't been notified already, which I would probably be the one notifying you, or my planner Holly, or our engineer, our study engineer that's working on it. But these are all of the projects that are going on. There's a lot, and I'll show you visually where that is right here. So, this map needs to be updated. Utah County is done. That should be blue. But otherwise, all of those striped areas are areas where we are doing any studies, or studies have been funded and may not yet have quite started yet. So we're getting there, at least in the central and eastern part of the areas. We're working on it. We're getting to you. So if you haven't heard from me yet, you will. But everyone else should be aware that there are studies going on within your community. And if you have any questions on any of these studies, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So quickly, in your regions, Davis County, actually, they are almost done. I should have updated. I didn't quite have a chance to update these slides, but those are all the studies that are going on within your community. And I have all this data, so I'm going to quickly just go over this. And if you have any questions for your community, again, just email me and I can provide any of these. They should be getting their finalization early next year or mid next year. Cache County is also getting a lot of flood study updates, and we are in the process of getting or finalizing to get a preliminary map out. So we'll probably see a preliminary maybe mid next year. So wanted to point that out, but we're moving along on that, and it's we just got the our floodplain mapping in. Weber County is the same. We're coming along on that one, and we're about to issue a preliminary map early next year. And Great Salt Lake, if you have not been notified, we are also doing a Great Salt Lake study, and it's going to be a contiguous study around the lake. And it is a completely separate study from, like, say, a Weber County, Davis County, Salt Lake County. So that's on a separate track, but we are updating that as well to get more accurate data. Salt Lake County is almost done, and we should hopefully see a process to finalize that soon. And Summit County's maps are going effective in March. So those are pretty much done. We just need to get through some more FEMA reviews and issue maps, the final maps. Provo River and Utah Lake, those are kind of two separate studies, but they're going to be combining because we obviously understand that Provo River drains into the lake, and it was requested that the lake be added to the Provo River study. So we're working on those. Oh, we already talked about that. And then Tooele County, we are doing that base level engineering. And like I mentioned, the 20 miles, those are your red lines on this map here. And all of the yellow lines are all of the new study that we're doing using that base level engineering process. So they're going to get a lot more great information to help plan and develop within this county. And it is just the eastern part of the county, unfortunately. That's the funding that was available. It's not the entire county. I wish I could have, but that's what I had at the time. So we are also doing that in Washington County. There's 370 miles that are getting updated with a Washington County study that we're doing, and our hydraulics are underway for that. And then upcoming projects, like I said, if you haven't heard from me yet, which some of you may not have, we are doing some very large projects upcoming. So the Wasatch Uinta Basin, we are going to be studying a good portion of Wasatch County, Duchesne, Uinta, and Daggett County. All those communities have been funded, and we're running the analysis now on the BLE, and it's so big that we didn't want to have a large length of time before we talk to you about the project and you saw some results. So that is coming shortly. And that's 8,200 stream miles being assessed. And then that's what that looks like. Actually, just in the red areas, I apologize, or in the red boundary. And then Greater Sevier is going to be our biggest project. That is 7 counties, 67 communities, a couple tribal nations, and those are 17,000 miles to be assessed. So that is coming. We were waiting for one more piece of LiDAR, and that hopefully is being finalized as we speak. So that process or project is going to be initiated very shortly. And that's what that looks like, 17,000 miles. All right, so, oh, and then I mentioned earlier that we have a statewide alluvial fan inventory that we're doing. This is just a piece of the areas that have been done already. We're gonna finish this out statewide. So right now we have 394 active alluvial fans just in these studied areas. We're gonna get a lot more. And these are just dangerous areas that we want communities to be aware of this risk and to plan around it. So our 5-year plan that we have here, we're gonna reinitiate Iron County, and then we're gonna get into Grand Carbon and Embry, possibly back in Utah County, and then Beaver Wayne and San Juan, and then Box Elder, Beaver Wayne and San Juan, oh, LiDAR. So we have a plan to get to you if you're not on this list, and because a lot of you either have paper maps or no information at all. So we're getting there, I promise. So, and these are start years. So it'll take 5 to 7 years after that start date. So really, why is all this information important? Why am I sharing this with you? Not all flood risk is mapped. And just because the risk is not mapped doesn't mean it's not there. It's there. We just haven't had it on a map. So we really want you as a community to be aware of the flood risks in your community. Flood risk does not stay within the lines on a map. And that's one of the things that why 70% of all of our flood risk is outside of a mapped area, because we can do our best to put in the most accurate information available, but Mother Nature doesn't stay on that map sometimes. So how can you plan to permit and permit unforeseen impacts on existing development? You know, kind of some things to consider as a local community. And then flood risk does change over time, like we talked about, and want you to be aware that just because, you know, the risk is shown one way today, it may not be the same, you know, in 5, 10, 20 years from now. So, I have a couple more slides here, some examples of changing risk. I can quickly go over these, but we all know Hilldale had their event. They had 2 inches of rain about 90 minutes. And that was a 100-year rain event. And unfortunately, we did have a ton of lives lost in that. Still gets to me today. And then Salt Lake City, we talked about that. That was a 200-year rain event. So they had about 2.5 inches of rain in 2.5 hours. Luckily, our snow year, 2018, 2019, weather cooperated and we had runoff, perfect runoff, or else that could have been a very high year for water, a big flooding year. Little Cottonwood Canyon and St. George. Wanted to point these out because these were huge, short duration, high intensity storms. And unfortunately, we're just seeing more of those. And those are from our partners at the Weather Service. We had 3 inches of rain in Little Cottonwood in 45 minutes. That's a lot of water. And then same with St. George, you know, the Weather Service mentioned it was 2 inches of rain in 2 hours, but I've heard conflicting reports from the community that said they had that in 45 minutes. So it would depend on the area that you were located in, where the gauge was in order to show that. So the Weather Service did mention that this was at a gauge and not where that, maybe not where that high intensity rainfall was, but that's just in the last 5 years. I mean, and these are just notable events. You know, we've had, you know, Emery County had an event this last year, earlier this year. We've had several big, really high intensity storms. So we just want people to be aware of what their risk is. Anyways, these are just some intervals here, you know, some visuals of Little Cottonwood. That was over, you know, the highway going up Little Cottonwood Canyon, and people had to stop because of this massive flooding that was happening. And that was, you know, downstream of where the flood occurred. I mean, I would guess that this person is 6 feet tall, so you got a 12-foot wall of boulders and debris, you know, down this canyon, and that's just in one area. St. George has had their flood event with the erosion hazards. And wanted to point this out. St. George has an erosion risk. We know that. This is, I think, just out St. George. I think this is Fort Pierce Wash. And a study was done in 2006 and then later studied this last year to see if there were any changes to their erosion hazard zone. And just looking at the difference between 2006 and 2018, development is occurring. You can clearly see the changes in the river system. So that is one of the main reasons why we want our maps accurate. So, development that is occurring can develop appropriately and safely so we don't put anyone in harm's way. And then obviously our revised flood risk has better, just based on better data. I think this is the city of Camas where they didn't have a flood risk zone identified, but it obviously was always there, or maybe this is not. This is a different area. The flood risk was always there, and now you can see it on a map that flood risk is. Oh, this is Springville. Floodway was always there. The stream channel is always there. It's just how now we've shown it on a map. And then same with data, you might have that approximate area that was studied back in the 80s, and now this is what it would look like today with the new information. And again, same here, back in the 80s, it was studied with a zone A, and now we have a detailed analysis, and it might not be as bad, or maybe worse in some cases than it was showing previously. So this, and then alluvial fans. We are, there's a lot of development going on in alluvial fans at the base of mountains. So be very vigilant about these areas and how we develop in them. And then obviously increased risk after wildfire. And this is North Ogden, where they're starting to develop a subdivision in this alluvial fan area, which is very dangerous. And this is all the debris. This was not placed there. This is all debris coming and boulders and rocks coming out of the canyon. So each event it creeps. And then we'll talk increased flood risk after fire another time, but this is Saratoga Springs in the Knolls fire, a beautiful picture, unfortunate circumstances, but yeah, flood risk does increase after wildfire, especially downstream. So here's just some quick important uses of that flood risk data. It's not just for permitting and planning. You can use it for anything: flood risk awareness, education, reduction in rescue and relief efforts. Now that you know where your risk is, how do you plan around that as an emergency official? So those are kind of some questions I would pose to you. Life's not waterproof. I wish it was, but it's not. And these are those reference links. So now what I want to do is, and my contact information is here, but I'll leave this up. So what I would like you to do is I'm going to put this in the chat, put this link in the chat on the National Flood Hazard Layers. So I'm going to do this real quick. And anyone, if you want to stop me now, please feel free, and ask questions. But I'm going to put this link in the chat, and what I want you to do is go to the site, and what I'd like you to do is pick an address. It could be your home, it could be your office, it could be anywhere. And see and identify what your flood risk is. And again, these are digital maps. So if you're in a community that does not have digital maps yet, maybe pick somewhere that does. Probably, I would say north of Utah County, and see where that is, and want to see what you guys come up with. And I will see if I can do this with you. So for now, let's go back here, present tab. So for me, the state capitol, I'm just going to pick that. So that is 110 State Office Building, Salt Lake. Salt Lake City, Utah. So it will pinpoint, so any address that you put in there that has a digital map, that is obviously not the state capital, that's odd. But it picked a location that's obviously not the capital, but it is a location in Salt Lake City. So now you can zoom in, zoom out, anywhere that you have information for, digital information. So now we picked this, and what you can do now is, now it's on the screen. You can either take a screenshot to identify, to provide this information to anybody, either a resident or your own family or anyone that's curious. You can either take a screenshot, or there's this NFHL print tool, and if you don't see it, it's this toolbox that's right here on the side that you just click it, and then you can print a mini. It's called a fermet, and it's a mini portion of this flood risk information. So you click the identifier once, or the point once, and then place it anywhere. So let's put it on, let's see, this building. So we want to know the flood risk or see a portion of that for that particular building. Then you kind of scroll down a little bit, and then you click run. It'll take a minute because it's pulling information from a national database. So it'll take maybe a minute or two, and sometimes it's been up to 5. I apologize, but it's what we're dealing with. But you will get this output file or this link, and then you click on that, and you need to see a different screen now because it's in a different window. And that is not there now. Not there. Oh, a tab. You can see you can have a little mini, it's called a paper fermet. It's a small portion of the flood map and the legend on the side. So you can give this to a lender, a agent, anybody that is looking for information. That is a perfect way to get information. So I hope you guys did that with us. But other than that, I think that is all I have for today. I know I talk a ton, and I am sorry. But does anyone have any questions, thoughts? Yay, Tracy said it was area of minimal flood risk, so hooray.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. I was able to pull up my house and see that this particular house I'm now in has minimal risk, so it's good to know.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that we work on, and a lot of it's multi-year, a lot of it takes time. So thank you. This is just some information on how maps are made, and I hope you guys participate, as local communities, when we come to your community and start mapping. So it's not just for your planners and not just for your building officials and things like that. You can use this information too, and any help to make them more accurate is welcomed and appreciated. So that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Jamie, for your presentation and for your time and commitment to this work. As a reminder, this webinar and all other webinars in this series will be available on the DEM website at dem.utah.gov/exercises. And our webinar next week is actually postponed or canceled because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So I hope you will enjoy your time over Thanksgiving. Our next I Wonder webinar will be held December 3rd. And it is on the topic, I wonder how Survey 123 can be used in my jurisdiction. So we look forward to that presentation from both Josh Grunwald and Lindsay Means from our operations and planning sections. If you have any I Wonder topic suggestions, please reach out to my email, which is tbodley@utah.gov, to have your topic added to our calendar. We're always excited to help you explore and get to know all that DEM can offer the emergency management community. Until next time, have a good day. Bye all.